Okay.
Yeah, brilliant. All right.
All right.
Thanks for coming on, Amir. I appreciate your time.
My pleasure. I was looking forward to it. So
Good,
yeah.
good. I'm glad. I saw a video yesterday actually of you talking to Anne and Harry, and the video about the feelings associated with self-realization, what that brings up for an individual. And in particular, you were talking about the difference that you might experience in terms of putting your awareness on a door, like an inanimate object, or having your awareness on a human being, a person.
Well, Harry brought that up. Yes.
Yeah.
And he said that, you feel the same kind of love looking at the door, and it can even be intense. But then something slightly changes if your wife walks through that door and your attention shifts to her. Mm. And when I told it to my wife, she said, well, you should get up and give me a hug every time I walk through the door.
Yeah. I think I found that interesting because that's not my experience, that I can love a door as much as I can love my wife. Yes. So it's interesting to me that somebody's having that experience, and Anne seemed to agree with him. Like Anne was like, yeah, well, that's my experience too. So how did you find that?
Well, I'm jealous. And I have to be true to my own experience, which is that there is not just a quantitative difference, which they described. They did say, something gets enhanced or amplified with the same experience of love when it is in relationship to another person, which is interesting to talk more. I would like to talk more with them about what that amplification means on the experiential level, because maybe it's not that different from what I am feeling, what my experience is. But for me, it's definitely not a quantitative, but a qualitative difference. It's a completely different kind of experience. I can relate to feeling a sense of some kind of closeness or intimacy with inanimate objects, or definitely with my dog. Even, with animals, yes. If I think about my dog, his name is Corgi, and I love that dog, and sometimes I feel like, well, there's something very pure and direct in the kind of love that I feel we exchange. So yes, I can relate to that with animals, or at least with Corgi. I don't know about animals.
Yeah.
and maybe also with I have an orchard which I planted 2 years ago of about 50 trees. And when I walk in that field and I kind of look after the trees and fix the irrigation and all that, I have somewhat of a similar sense of expansion and connection with my environment. Mm-hmm. But there is something in the passionate, creative interaction with another person where we both kind of lean, if that's in Zoom, then we lean toward the screen as if we want to kind of merge with each other through the screens, which I never have with non-human beings.
Yeah.
What's your experience of that?
Yeah, I think very similar. I experience a profound relationship with my dog. I mean, we can't communicate in words, so we can communicate in energy and body language. and
Yes.
vibe, and he picks up on my energy and I pick up on his energy, and we have a relationship when we're out walking together, and he's constantly seeking feedback from me, and I'm constantly, monitoring him to see how he's going and how he's behaving and things like that. So there's certainly a connection there. And I will go for walks in nature and feel, my mind start to quieten down and feel quite expanded with the trees and with the bush around me and things like that. So there's a certain quality of connection there too. But I agree with you that it's not the same quality or quantity as a connection with a person who can not only receive you energetically, but can communicate with you in a different way, like can communicate with you directly. And there does seem to be the possibility of amplification. Not every time I interact with a human being is that my experience, but sometimes, and when it does happen, it's really nice. So yeah, that's my.
And yeah, and I'm thinking just a little bit about what I said about this kind of passionate, interested, wanting to merge with another person, and I want to add also that sometimes it's not that kind of passionate movement, but it's a more relaxed kind of appreciation. Wow, I really love this person. And it can be much more not as dramatic.
Yeah.
And nevertheless, it can be in terms of the experience of feeling connected and loving the other person. It's just another color maybe of the same feeling.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting. I haven't thought about it because these are two different experiences. Actually, if I just look at the experience and I think of specific people when I think about the experiences, then I would call the first one, there's definitely an erotic element to it. Not sexual, but erotic in the sense of passionately wanting to merge with the other person, as you would feel with a beautiful piece of art, or and the second experience is more like a gentle feeling at home with the other person. And it's kind of a very appreciative, delightful experience of like, what a beautiful person. I love this guy, and that's, so these are two different experiences, and both kind of seem to be related to love.
Yeah, I agree with that. I maybe would add a third, because I've heard it articulated where John Vervaeke in particular has articulated this a few times that I've heard. I don't know if you're familiar with John or not, but
yes.
So yeah, you're talking about an erotic kind of love, or an eros, and then the more sitting back, appreciative kind of love maybe maps onto a type of love John talks about, which is philia. So where we get the term friendship, yeah, or just appreciation. So philia Sophia is the love of wisdom. So it's an appreciation of wisdom, and that's the etymology of the term philosophy. But then the third type of love he talks about, and I've experienced too, is agape, which is a love of the other in the sense of wanting the best for the other in their own growth and development. So it's kind of similar to the way a parent might love a child, or similar to the way, Jesus loves his disciples, let's say. It's like the kind of love that just sees the innocence and the vulnerability of the other and wants to see the absolute best for them, which is different to eros and philia. So yeah, I think there are different different flavors of love and different ways that it can show up and express itself. And it's interesting to explore all of them.
Well, and it's, yes, so I have to say, I'm not sure if I'm that familiar with the agape kind of love. I don't have children, maybe toward my dog, that's what I feel, I don't know. But that's an interesting variety to look into.
Yeah.
I think also that what I'm very interested in, and I think this is going to be my next research project. I'm in the midst of a PhD research project, and I'm going to finish it in about a year. And my next project is going to be about about love in a spiritual context.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, an interesting question is about the relationship between the experience of love as an all-pervasive, boundless, objectless essence of reality, which I think many mystics speak about and is also part of my experience, and how that affects our relationships with other people, our dog, our cup of coffee, everything around us and beyond.
Mm.
So when that objectless, boundless, and I would add unconditional love becomes focused on a specific person, object, and then it becomes very entangled with our human conditioning and becomes very conditional and unavoidably, etc., etc. So that's kind of where I feel a very fertile and interesting, fascinating area is the connection between those two.
Yeah, brilliant. Very cool. Do you mind if I ask what your current PhD is on?
Yeah, sure. It's called Living Transcendence, a phenomenological study of spiritual exemplars. And living transcendence is a word, a term that I kind of made up, which to distinguish it from peak experiences. There has been quite a lot of research already done, starting with William James 100 years ago, 120 now, on peak experiences or mystical experiences, spiritual experiences. Walter Stace wrote a lot about that in the mid 60s, etc. But there has been hardly any research done on what Abraham Maslow called the high spiritual plateau, which is people living consistently, ongoingly on the plateau or the plane that people usually reach only in peak experiences. And that is of great interest for me, also because I've had more than enough peak experiences in my life and transformative experiences, but nevertheless, I don't consider myself somebody who is on a spiritual high plateau. And so in terms of my continued personal development or spiritual development, I felt like I want to engage with that possibility, and maybe by meeting people who are living transcendence, I could, something would stick, or I would, something would be stirred up or awakened in me that would facilitate that movement toward that state. And so I started the field work about a year and a few months ago, because it was during the Corona time. I couldn't actually go and spend time with different exemplars. So the people that I decided I would approach to interview about living transcendence, I call them spiritual exemplars. And these are people who exemplify to other people the best in their spiritual path or tradition. And I had a list of a few dozen such individuals in different traditions, different cultures around the world. And initially, I thought I would go and spend time with some of them. Of course, I couldn't spend time with all 80 of them, but 20, 30 of them, I thought that would be a nice project for a few years.
Mhm.
But then the pandemic started, and I had to do it all by Zoom. And I ended up interviewing 36 spiritual exemplars.
Wow.
Most of them I interviewed 2 or 3 times, so about 4 or 5 hours each.
Mm.
With some of them that I connected very deeply with, I kept in touch since I interviewed them, and so we have been meeting regularly. And 2 of those are Anne Sweet and Harry Alto, who
Yeah.
you saw in that video, and yeah. So
Excellent.
that was my research, and I basically asked them because I was more interested not in the conceptual framework that these people have, in how they interpret their understanding, but actually in their lived experience. So I would ask them questions about, tell me about significant experiences of the last few days, or what is, so much more about what's going on right now in this conversation for you, which to me is much more interesting than hearing their biographies or their conceptual understanding.
Yeah, yeah. And that's really interesting to me too. That's fascinating. I mean, so for me, I got into spirituality, you could say, about 6 years ago. And prior to that, had never really been aware or familiar with spirituality of any kind. And it was a personal crisis of mine that I was going through in my life that led me to start looking in that direction. And yeah, what I found gave me a greater sense of meaning in life, somewhat of a purpose, and a connection to something bigger than me. And that has since that time, 6 years ago, has kind of been the driving force behind a lot of the directions that I'm moving in life, is in search of that, is in clarifying that, is in trying to deepen my experience of that. And so, yeah, when you talk about speaking to 36 spiritual exemplars about their lived experience, it's like, yeah, that sounds really fruitful to me in a couple of different ways. Firstly, it's like the first place I'm drawn to and curious about is, what were the commonalities that you found between them? Like, I'm sure there were certain things that they would all say that you found were common amongst them. Would that be true?
Well, that was definitely in the research question, was what are the essences, or one essence that is common to spiritual exemplars of different traditions, and what are the differences between them? Because obviously, interpretation plays a big role in how, and language, in how we understand our experience. And sometimes you can't separate the experience from your interpretation of it. I think mostly you can't.
Yeah.
So what I'm doing now, because I finished the field work in August in a visit I did to Denmark, where I interviewed a Buddhist, Tibetan Buddhist teacher, a Western teacher of Tibetan Buddhism, and he was the 36th and last exemplars that I interviewed. And since then, I started analyzing the transcripts of hundreds of hours, I think, of interviews, and I can tell you a couple. I mean, I'm still in the process, so no final answers, but maybe in a year I'll be much more able to answer that question.
Yeah.
But I think two themes that seem to be common to all of them. One is the presence of something stable and unchanging in their experience even in the midst of emotional turmoil, challenges, life challenges, et cetera, et cetera. And people, these people mostly say, we experience life just like anybody else, with all the ups and downs. Sometimes we have a depression, and sometimes we get very angry, and et cetera, et cetera. And there is something which is constant, unchanging, untouched by everything that happens on all other levels. And they express that in different ways. So they don't necessarily say it explicitly and obviously as I do now. But that to me is a sense I got from all of them, and I think I can find parts of the transcripts in which they each say that in their own language.
Yeah.
This would be one thing, and the other. So I'm actually thinking of writing a paper on the ups and downs of the spiritual high plateau, which I like, which I think is a kind of a funny name. People think that which is interesting. I think many people think that you reach some kind of a flat line where you become completely equanimous and detached from suffering. And then, you don't really mind if somebody chops your hands off or something like that, or, which is completely different to what these people express. These spiritual exemplars told me. Some of them even said that they feel life much more intensely and seem to be more affected by life than before their awakening, or etc. And the other thing is a sense. I'm thinking of writing a paper called Internal Compasses and Guiding Lights, which are two ways many of these exemplars related to a sense of direction or a calling or some internal compass that some say they have had since childhood or since they were born, and some kind of became aware of it later in life. But a sense, and I definitely can relate to it from my own experience, a sense that something that you can't really see, but is pulling you in a certain direction, and also everything that happens kind of in your life happens in relationship to that, which is mysterious and very interesting, I think. Yeah, so these are two themes that for me, and the theme of love and connection, which I think is a universal theme, and but that's what I'm going to do my next research on. So I'm not going to, yes. So that's what became the most interesting aspect actually for me.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, they all sound really interesting and fascinating, and I'm not surprised to hear those three things were commonalities. I get particularly interested in the guiding light, the inner compass as to what that is and how that shows up. I mean, I can sort of map experiences that I've had onto that, and when you were talking about it, I am kind of internally going, oh yeah, I've had some sense that my life is being sort of directed in a certain way, and choices that I'm making are not necessarily based on like what I would call my own inner desire or my own choice. It's more like the choice has already been made and I'm just kind of enacting it in the world almost. It's kind of like an intuition, an intuitive sense that I should be doing something, or I should I'm trying to think of examples to make it more concrete, because it sounds quite abstract right now. But say, for example, like decisions to leave a certain workplace. I've made certain choices to leave certain workplaces over my life, and I feel like they've been relatively easy decisions to make because they don't necessarily come from a head space. They come from a gut space, or a much deeper grounded space. And it's like, it's very clear to me what the right choice is. You know, even decisions like ending certain relationships or ending friendships seem to be reasonably clear because they're coming from some kind of guidance. And
can I ask you something about that? So the fact that the decision is clear doesn't necessarily make it easy.
Oh, 100%. It's very difficult.
So what?
It's very difficult sometimes. Even though the decision is clear, it's very difficult to actually take the step of following that choice.
Okay, so now you're touching on a question that, or on an observation that I'm very curious about, what's like in your experience, which is that sometimes the most significant and even difficult decisions we make in life seem to be we had no choice.
Mm-hmm.
So in those cases, choicelessness and absolute freedom of choice and strong willpower to follow up on the choice seem to be like two sides of the same coin.
Yes.
And that to me is these are very interesting points where, because usually we think either you have no choice, you were told by God, this is what you need to do, and nobody asks your opinion about it, or this is completely willful, volitional, difficult choice that you had to make. And they usually seem to be very different. And in my experience, there are points in life, there are decisions in life where the two are just two ways of looking at the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, can you relate to that? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does, for sure. Yeah.
So anyway, I don't have much more to say about it, but I think these are interesting experiences.
Yeah, I think you know, it depends on how you kind of come to your decisions and how you make decisions. But you know, I specifically remember leaving my first job out of university, which was with a company called Deloitte at an accounting firm. And the choice to me kind of seemed to be stay with a very secure, well-developed career path with high financial reward and really well-defined prospects for growth, or go after something that's quite insecure, doesn't necessarily guarantee you financial reward, and is much more difficult in terms of the amount of work and stress required. And I chose to go after that path, which was to work in a tech startup for a period of time, because geez, why did I decide to do that? I don't know, really. I just felt a calling to. It was almost like I had to see what that would be like, what that experience would be like.
Well, I think that some choices, because the result of such choices, the accumulative result of such choices is a growing confidence in our own ability to take risks and confidence that even if we make mistakes, even if we fall on our face, we have what it takes to keep on going. And I think some choices, that's the only purpose that's the only purpose they serve, is we want to prove to ourselves
Yes.
that we can be free, and we have the guts and the independence to do something different. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So that's definitely true. And there's been other choices that I can remember in my life that have been made for similar reasons. It's like one choice represents security and one choice represents freedom, let's say, to boil it down really, really simply. And almost every time that I can remember, I've chosen the freedom option because it just seems so much more attractive to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's very nice. I love it. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. I used to as a teenager and then a young man, I used to love going for hikes and get lost, just for the hell of it, just come to a point where I don't actually know how to go back.
Yeah.
And there's something about the adrenaline rush that you get when you get lost, and the sense that I know I will I'll find my way back.
Yeah.
That is very exciting, and I think very strengthening in terms of, in speaking of what's required on a long-term spiritual journey. I think that's one of the qualities that is often required.
Yeah, definitely. To be able to find yourself in any situation, in any place, at any moment, and have I like the way you put it. It was like a confidence that it's okay. Whatever happens is okay. Yeah.
I mean, there were times there were times in my life, especially after I got seriously into the spiritual journey, where those choices of getting lost or something like that seemed like a kind of a kindergarten game. Because when you're in the midst of a real spiritual crisis, and you don't know what's up and down and what's down, what's forward and what backward, and the waves cover you, and you don't know if you will ever get out of that storm, then it's not let me try kind of game.
No, there's much higher stakes than that.
Yeah.
It's very, very serious. Yeah, for sure.
But maybe,
like,
mm-hmm.
I was just going to say, like, it perhaps it's that you need to take things in incremental steps, and you needed to have those first experiences in order to give you some confidence, and then you grow through those experiences into more and more challenging experiences that hit home at a deeper core level, and then you see how you navigate those challenges.
Yes, I guess so. And maybe it's the same. It's the same. Well, maybe the calling, or the pull toward the unknown, toward the mystery, is there long before we become consciously aware of it. And so we start responding to it in ways that are appropriate for our, maturity, and what we're able to take.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's true. Well, that resonates with my experience too. And also, I feel like when you start stepping into the unknown and making some decisions towards freedom and away from security, let's say, to use that dichotomy, it can be challenging because the people around you that love you and care about you don't necessarily know why you're doing what you're doing, and they don't really understand it necessarily, and they get frightened by it or concerned about it, and are worried about some of the choices that you're making, and so might try to stop you or convince you and persuade you otherwise. And in my experience anyway, I found it really difficult to try and explain myself as to why I was doing what I was doing sufficiently enough for them to understand. And I failed many times at being able to convey my reasoning adequately enough. And yeah, I
But
found that one of,
it didn't stop you. It didn't stop you though.
it didn't stop me. No, it didn't stop me from making the choice.
So that's an interesting observation, because failing to explain to others also means that you fail to explain it to yourself. So you had no rationality or logical explanation to justify what you were doing, and that is okay.
I don't think that's true. No, I think I believed the reasons that I was doing what I was doing for the most part, but the reasons didn't seem valid to the people. Like so the people I'm talking about mainly are my parents, let's say, or my family.
Yeah.
The reasons that I had, or the justifications that I had in my head, were things like, if I don't do it now, I will regret doing it later, and I need to jump in and try this experience and see what happens. And worst case scenarios, I can always return to the safe job, or I can always return to, for example, playing cricket, because leaving my cricket club was one of the things that was a security base for me, or leaving a relationship that I'd had with my ex-wife for many years as well. Like, so there are a few different decisions through my life that I've made. I was reasonably clear as to why I was making them, but the ways in which I articulated those reasons didn't seem to convince my dad or my mom or my brother and other members of my family.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with that. I dropped out of medical school at the end of the 5th year to pursue my spiritual search. And there was a period of a couple of months between my decision to do that and when I actually, so I decided I would at least finish the 5th year and finish all the exams, and then I was going to go join a spiritual community in England. And during those 2 months, everybody around me, from my closest friends to my parents to the students, psychologist, etc., tried to convince me to at least stay 1 more year, get my MD license, and it all made sense to me, to the point that I felt they're actually convincing me. What they're saying is convincing. They're right.
Yeah.
But that's not going to make any difference in terms of my decision.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a very interesting point, in which you knew that even if other people convince you that you're doing the wrong thing, that I was doing the wrong thing, I would still go ahead and do it.
Yeah. There's something deeper that you're responding to in that moment. So yeah, there's something about the unknown and the call of the unknown that you were responding to, that was so important to you that it defied logical reasoning.
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah. And somebody said to me, one of my friends who actually supported that, said to me something like, the greater the sacrifice, the greater the reward. And in retrospect, that makes a lot of sense to me, because you get so much confidence in your trust in the unknown and your desire to go into the unknown by making such sacrifices, that confidence is invaluable. I think is the greatest asset for a spiritual seeker, is knowing that you're dead serious about it, and that you're willing to make any sacrifice to follow your intention.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Yeah, the sacrifices that I've made along the way are part of the fuel on the fire that burns inside of me for wanting to develop along the spiritual path, I think.
Mhm. Beautiful.
Yeah. I am very curious to see what you find when you publish your PhD paper, and also very curious to see how the next project goes around love and connection, because love is such a beautiful experience, and like I personally want to cultivate more and more of it in my life. Love of my wife, and love of my dog, and love of my friends, and people in my community. And find the ways in which I keep myself separate from love, or find say, for example, judgments that I hold about myself or about others that might keep love at bay or interfere with the experience of love from time to time, and try and examine those judgments to the point where I can let them go, because well, not necessarily let them go, but trying to be careful here. Not necessarily let the judgments go. So be aware of the judgments themselves, but not allow them to curtail love in any way, because I don't think it's worth it in the end.
Yeah. I think my the way I am thinking about going deeper in that direction is slightly different. I'm more into following my heart and my passion, and trusting that whatever obstacles are in the way will be revealed in the process of actually passionately, with great interest and great love, following that what's calling me and what's pulling me, and that I don't have to. So, I mean, obviously, I have not. I don't know if obviously, but there are many obstacles, conditionings, psychological, cultural, and open questions, for example, about sexuality and love, and the relationship between them, and the confusion that creates sometimes, often. And I not just trust, but it's actually my experience that these issues get revealed and get naturally addressed when I follow my passion, and when I'm just very interested in going in that direction, and doing what I can to go in that direction. Then everything else falls into place sooner or later, with effort or without effort. But the passionate interest and proactively following that interest is kind of, for me, the key to such development. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So perhaps it would be helpful if I outlined an example of what I mean, and then you can maybe reflect on that and tell me how you might address that with the passion and the pursuing what you're passionate about. So one example that happened for me recently was I found myself getting quite upset with a friend of mine for something that they were doing, and was quite judgmental, and sort of not really holding them in compassion or acceptance. It was more like, you're wrong for the way you're behaving. And so because of that, I am essentially cutting myself off, and I might tell you why I'm doing that. So I might say, here's the behavior that I have a problem with, and here's what I suggest you should do otherwise. But that's how I see things, and I'm not really interested in getting past that until you're willing to acknowledge that point to start with. And I would recognize that as an obstacle to love, for example, my love of this person and the connection, the friendship between us. And so this is the kind of obstacle I'm talking about in terms of like being more aware of that as it arises. And I'm curious as to when you talk about pursuing your passion, like I totally understand that. That makes sense to me. How would you see that applying to this situation, for example?
Well, I have some people that I'm thinking of a specific situation, which is people who I used to feel I trusted and felt close to. And over the last couple of years, because they started believing in the conspiracy theories around the COVID and everything else, the whole range of conspiracy theories that are floating in the cultural space nowadays. I felt very upset with them for not using their brain properly, and that I couldn't trust them anymore, because I thought, I thought you were sane people, and now I'm not sure if you're that sane. And that's painful. That's painful and disturbing for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that my response to it is not mature or balanced or compassionate. Not that I know what a balanced, compassionate response would be. That's at this point is somewhat, I can use my imagination to think of what the Dalai Lama would say to such people, but as an exemplar of sanity and compassion and maturity.
Yeah.
Right. But that doesn't really help me much. What do I do with this? I don't quite know what I do with this. I assume, I acknowledge the fact that my response is not very mature or compassionate or loving.
Yeah.
I feel the pain of being disconnected from these people and not being able to find it in myself to connect with them in a constructive, helpful, loving way. And I assume that at the level of consciousness or heart opening that I'm at the moment, there's not much more I can do. So I actually have to shift. So I don't have the tools at the level that I'm at to respond.
Right. Okay. Yeah, interesting. All right. That makes sense. So I feel similarly to you in that I probably don't have the ability at the level of consciousness I'm at either to respond skillfully or maturely in the situation in which I find myself. However, I do feel like I have some insight or some tools to navigate the situation a little better than what I currently am navigating it, if that makes sense. So I don't think I can jump all the way to Dalai Lama level of just unconditional love all the time. But I would say that what I can do is attempt to accept my friend more fully than what I have been, and attempt to acknowledge what it is touching in me, and what I find uncomfortable about the behavior that I'm seeing. And so I can do those things, or at least I can attempt to do those things. Acceptance and acknowledging the process in me that it's instigating. So whether I feel frightened, or I feel uncomfortable, or I feel shut down in that situation, those are all experiences that I'm having. They have nothing to do with the other. And so I can own that and be responsible for that. And having owned that, trying to accept where they're at, because I've been where they're at, and I've done similar behaviors in the past. So it's like I can at least have some kind of way into how I might accept that behavior. It's just that currently that's not a default pattern for me to do that, to practice acceptance or to practice taking responsibility for my side of the fence. My default pattern is much more readily to shut down and get angry, or shut down and push away.
Well, Maitreya, let me ask you, do you care for that person?
Yeah.
Do you love them?
Yes.
So you're not only angry with them, that anger is actually probably related to your caring about them and loving them.
Yes.
And wanting to be close to them and feeling that there's something in the way, etc., etc. So that to me is interesting to see that. As we're talking now, I'm reflecting on my experience with those people that I feel have gone into some kind of crazy land, and to see that I still love them, I still care about them, I appreciate them. I don't think that, yes, they behave now in a somewhat of an insane way that makes no sense to me at all, but I really like them. And I otherwise, so this is a confusing mixture of emotions that needs to be acknowledged. And I think now as we're talking about it, I'm realizing, it's easy if when I'm upset with somebody and just want to make them face, what they're not facing, or change their behavior, to be very focused on that and forget that the background is the connection between us and the care I feel for them.
Yeah.
And it's more difficult to hold that whole complex of emotions.
Yes, agreed, 100%. Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So I imagine that say people that are a little further ahead on the path, say Harry and Anne, for example, would be able to have conversations like these, but still be aware of the background of that holding and that compassion in the background, and not have all of their attention focusing and fixated on the issue, I would imagine.
I think, and you're familiar with Wilber's waking up and growing up.
Yep.
I think that people who have woken up, maybe more than you and I have not necessarily grown up more than you and I have.
Yeah.
And the situation we are talking about, it's the growing up aspect which is required, the ability to hold the complex, contradictory emotions.
I think in this case, So I agree with you. The waking up and the growing up, the way I would distinguish them would be consciousness development and heart development, for example. So you can be in a state where you're aware of awareness all of the time. So you've awoken to consciousness at a fundamental level, and not necessarily have any heart awakening or any maturity development. And vice versa. I would say you can also have heart awakenings and be very compassionate and loving, and not have awareness on awareness, or be aware of a greater depth of being, for example. So yeah, I would say that those things are true. I just from the conversation that the 16-minute video or whatever it was, and the energy that I was picking up from Anne and Harry, they to me seemed to also have quite a depth of heart to them as well.
Yes, yes, but I wouldn't assume that that's necessarily the case for every person.
Oh yeah, 100% agreed. Yeah.
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 How are we doing time-wise? It's nearly an hour. I promised my wife to join her for breakfast in an hour and in 15 minutes. So
yeah, no worries. We can end it there for sure. I think that's been a nice conversation, a nice little entry into your work and what you're doing and attempting to achieve. And I think it's brilliant work. I think more people should be studying this kind of stuff, because it's really important to get this disseminated more widely among those that are interested. And so I think, yeah, it's fantastic, much needed qualitative work about spiritual awakening experiences and then eventually love as well. So yeah, I appreciate that you're doing this work. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we could definitely, I'd like to continue the conversation with you. I wasn't saying it like, let's finish the meeting now and we can continue for a bit more. And I would definitely like to continue the conversation with you maybe another time. So I think we just touched on different topics that are of great interest for me. And also I would love to, because as I'm starting to, even though it's still a year ahead, I'm starting to plan the research of what I call exemplary love, which is the experience and cultivation and expression of love by spiritual exemplars and by the people around them, usually who often live in communities or, those who are close to the teacher or the master.
Yeah.
So that's a topic I'm very interested in, and I think it has relevance to culture in general.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of creating in myself the conceptual or theoretical framework for such a research, and I'd love to talk with you about that as well. I think I get the impression that you are very interested in it.
Yeah,
and,
definitely.
probably have some thoughts on this. So
Well,
maybe we can.
one of the thoughts that I have on it is that my teacher Vishrant would be a really, really good interview subject for you to interview when you get around to that part of the research project, because yeah, he's enlightened and he's very, very much in touch with his heart, and so I think that would be a very valuable thing for you to do, to interview him, for sure. But yeah, I think absolutely, I'd love to keep in touch and keep the lines of communication open, and maybe tee up an interview with Vishrant if you're interested down the track.
Yeah, well, since you mentioned him, and let me ask you, what would you say that your relationship with him has a love component in it?
Yeah, it does. It's not love as in the way I love my friends or the way I love my wife. It's a different kind of love. It's I don't know. I wouldn't call it a guru-disciple love relationship necessarily, because I don't really know what that means. I mean, I've read a lot of things about guru-disciple kind of relationships, but from my side, it's more like the love that you might have for someone that has your best interests at heart and will take care of you no matter what. So I know, for example, that I can go to Vishrant with any problems that I'm having in my life, and he will be a very open and honest and clear sounding board for me, and he will attempt to give me advice that will help or bring a greater degree of awareness to the situation, and so I can trust him on a very deep level. So yeah, there is definitely a love component to our relationship, and he is someone that I value very deeply in my life, for sure. Mm.
So when you said there is a love component, but then you spoke mainly about trust and trust and intimacy of feeling that you could share with him
Mhm.
really what's going on for you, and that he would be accepting and helpful and wanting to support or help you in whatever way he can.
Mm.
Love, does the word love mean more to you in relationship to your teacher? Does it mean more than those two, that kind of intimacy and trust that you feel? Is there another element there?
There's certainly an element of my wanting to take care of him, and an element of my wanting to assist in any way I can, I suppose, if that makes sense.
Mm.
Yeah.
Assist in what?
Assist in so we live in a community here, a Buddhist community, and we were putting up videos online and have a Facebook community, and we run a wellness center here in Perth, Western Australia, called Restful Waters. And there's a lot of management and business things that need to be taken care of in regards to all of that operation, and I want to assist in ensuring that that goes as well as it possibly can, and that Vishrant can get his teachings out there, let's say, and assist in his mission in the world, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, we can continue this conversation, because I think the question of love in the relationship between people around a spiritual exemplar and the spiritual exemplar is an interesting one, and I think it's probably has somewhat different components than the love that the exemplar has for his or her students, or with their spouse or friends. So I think it's an interesting topic of exploring like the different components or colors of love.
Yes.
In the different relationships around the spiritual teacher or exemplar.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Nice meeting you. I'm really happy. I'm really happy you reached out to me and we are having this conversation.
Yeah, it's really nice to meet you too, Amir. I'm glad we got to have a Zoom call, and yeah, I would love to have another one with you. So maybe we can email and work out another time that works for both of us. And
let's do that.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, have a nice day. Rest of the day.
Enjoy your breakfast with your wife, my friend.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.